The familiar crunch of gravel under my tires felt different this time. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, the sprawling Victorian mansion loomed before me, its weathered brick facade holding 28 years of memories, some sweet, others bitter, like the conversation I was about to have. My name is Carmen, and I was about to tell my deeply religious parents that I had converted to a different faith. "Carmen, you're late," Mom's voice carried across the manicured lawn as I stepped out of my car. She stood on the wraparound porch, arms crossed, her perfectly styled hair catching the afternoon sun. Even from here, I could see her scrutinizing my appearance. "Traffic was horrible," I called back, forcing a smile. "Is Dad home?" "In his study. Come inside quickly. Dinner's getting cold." The house smelled like pot roast and tension. Mom's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she led me to the dining room, where Dad sat at the head of the table, reading glasses perched on his nose as he scrolled through his phone. "Hi, Dad," I said, leaning down to kiss his cheek. He barely looked up. "You're late." "I know, I'm sorry." I took my usual seat, the one I'd occupied for countless family dinners. "But I'm glad you both could make time. I have something important to tell you." Mom set down a steaming plate in front of me with more force than necessary. "Oh, is it about that new job you mentioned?" "No, I took a deep breath. "It's about my faith. I've been doing a lot of soul searching lately, and I've found a spiritual path that really speaks to me." The clatter of Dad's fork against his plate broke the sudden silence. "What exactly are you saying?" "I've converted to—" "Don't." Mom's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Don't you dare finish that sentence. Mom, please. This isn't a phase or rebellion. I've found something meaningful, something that brings me peace." Dad removed his glasses slowly, deliberately. "Peace? You want to talk about peace while you're breaking your mother's heart?" "I'm not trying to hurt anyone. This is about my personal journey, my relationship with—" "Enough." Dad's fist came down on the table, making the water glasses jump. "We didn't raise you this way, Carmen. We gave you everything. This house, the best schools, the right connections. And this is how you repay us." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "My faith doesn't change who I am. I'm still your daughter." "Are you?" Mom's words were quiet but sharp. "Because the daughter we raised would never betray her family like this." "Betray? Mom, Your mother and I need to discuss something," Dad interrupted, his voice eerily calm. "We've been updating our will recently. In light of this development, I think some changes are in order." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You're going to disown me over this?" "We're protecting our legacy," Mom said, her face a mask of cold determination. "This house, our assets, they're meant for someone who respects our values, our traditions." I stood up slowly, my untouched dinner growing cold. "So that's it? 30 years of love and family gone because I chose a different path?" "You chose this," Dad said, not meeting my eyes. "Not us." "I see." My voice was steady, despite the storm inside me. "Then I guess there's nothing left to say." I walked out of the dining room, past the family portraits lining the hallway, each one a snapshot of a life that no longer existed. As I reached for the front door, Mom called out, "Carmen, wait." I turned, hope flickering briefly. "Don't forget to take your childhood things from the attic. We'll be clearing it out soon." The door closed behind me with a final sounding click. In my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, staring at the house that had just become a symbol of everything wrong with conditional love. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "How did it go?" I typed back. "They're planning to disown me. Going to need your help with something." His response was immediate. "Name it." Looking up at my childhood home, I felt something shift inside me. They thought they could control me with threats and inheritance. Well, they were about to learn that karma works in mysterious ways. And I had just remembered something very interesting about the property deed to their precious house. "Meet me for coffee tomorrow," I texted Marcus. "I think it's time for some divine justice." As I drove away, the mansion grew smaller in my rearview mirror. But my resolve only grew stronger. They wanted to teach me a lesson about family values. I was about to teach them one about consequences. You want to do what? Marcus nearly choked on his cappuccino, drawing curious glances from nearby cafe patrons. Sell the house, I repeated, sliding a folder across the table. And I can do it legally. Look. Marcus wiped his mouth and opened the folder, his eyes widening as he read. Your grandmother left you partial ownership, joint deed with my parents. They never told me. I stirred my untouched coffee. Found out when I was helping Mom organize the study last month. They probably thought I'd never noticed the documents. That's huge, Carmen. Marcus leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair. But are you sure about this? It's pretty nuclear. They're trying to erase me, Marcus. 28 years of being the perfect daughter, and they're ready to throw it all away because I chose a different path. My voice cracked slightly. I need to show them they can't control me anymore. Okay. He nodded slowly. So what's the plan? I already called Francesca. She's a lawyer who specializes in property law. Meeting her in, I checked my phone, 40 minutes. Marcus grinned. You don't waste time, do you? Can't afford to. They're already talking about clearing out my things. The law office was modern and sleek, all glass and chrome. Francesca greeted us with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. Carmen, thanks for coming in. She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. And this is Marcus, my best friend and moral support. Good, you'll need both in situations like these. Francesca opened her laptop. I've reviewed the documents you sent. The joint deed is valid. And your grandmother's will is crystal clear. You have every right to initiate a sale. Without my parents' permission, you can force a partition sale. They'll have to be notified, of course, but they can't stop it. She paused, studying me. Though I should warn you, this will get messy. Messier than being disowned. Point taken. Francesca pulled out some papers. There's something else you should see. While reviewing the property history, I found these letters. The yellowed envelopes made my heart skip. My grandmother's handwriting was unmistakable. They're addressed to your father, Francesca explained, dated just before she changed her will to include you on the deed. My hands trembled as I read the first letter. She knew, I whispered. She knew they would do this. Marcus leaned in. Do what? Try to control their children through inheritance. Look. I pointed to a passage. Grandmother writes about how Dad's older brother was cut off from marrying outside their faith. She was afraid they'd repeat the pattern. Smart woman, Marcus murmured. She wanted to protect you, Francesca added. Give you leverage if they ever tried to use the house against you. I carefully folded the letters. Can we move quickly on this? Francesca nodded. I'll file the partition sale request today. We can have the house on the market by next week. Any preference for buyers? A slow smile spread across my face. Actually, yes. I want to be very selective about who gets it. Carmen, Marcus's tone was warning. Nothing illegal, I assured him. Just poetic justice. The house should go to someone who'll appreciate it for the right reasons. I'll need you to sign these, Francesca said, sliding over a stack of documents. Once you do, there's no going back. My pen hovered over the paper. 28 years of memories flashed through my mind. Birthday parties in the garden, Christmas mornings by the fireplace, quiet moments in the library. But then I remembered last night's dinner, the cold rejection in my parents' eyes. I signed. It's done, Francesca confirmed. I'll contact you when we have potential buyers. Outside the office, Marcus grabbed my arm. Hey, you okay? No, I admitted, but I will be. Want to help me clear out my things before they can throw them away? Of course, but first, he pulled me into a hug. You're the bravest person I know, Carmen. My phone buzzed, Mom calling. I declined the call and watched as a text message appeared instead. We're willing to discuss terms if you'll reconsider your choices. Family dinner tonight. I showed Marcus the message. They're scared, he said. They must have gotten the legal notice already. Good. I typed a reply. Sorry, can't make it. I'm busy house hunting, but not for myself. You might want to do the same soon. Savage, Marcus laughed. So what's next? I pulled out grandmother's letters, running my fingers over her familiar script. Next, we find the perfect buyers, someone who'll turn their precious status symbol into everything they fear. Karma's a beautiful thing, Marcus said, linking his arm through mine as we walked to his car. Yes, I agreed, feeling lighter than I had in days. Yes, it is. And this is the main library, I said, gesturing to the wall-to-wall bookshelves as I led Daisy and Ezekiel through the house. My grandmother collected first editions. Daisy's eyes sparkled as she ran her fingers along the leather-bound spines. It's magnificent. And you say this could be converted into a community space? Absolutely, I nodded. The zoning permits would allow for small gatherings, study groups. Perfect for our youth program, Ezekiel added, his deep voice warm with enthusiasm. The kids would love this. My phone buzzed again. The 10th call from Mom today. I silenced it without looking. Your parents must be heartbroken to sell such a beautiful home, Daisy said, then immediately covered her mouth. I'm sorry, Francesca mentioned it was a sensitive situation. It's okay. I moved toward the bay window, remembering countless rainy afternoons spent reading there. They made their choice. Now I'm making mine. Ezekiel cleared his throat. Actually, we should tell you something. We met your mother once, at a community council meeting last year. She was quite vocal about keeping our faith center out of the neighborhood. Of course she was, I laughed bitterly. Did she give you her whole protecting traditional values speech? Almost word for word. Daisy smiled. That's partly why we're interested. This location would be perfect for our outreach programs. And well, she exchanged a look with her husband. There's something satisfying about turning prejudice into progress. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Marcus. Your mom just called me. They know about the showing. Speaking of progress, I said, checking my watch, we should head downstairs. My lawyer will be here soon with the paperwork. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. But when I opened the front door, it wasn't Francesca standing there. Carmen. Mom's voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Actually, we don't. I moved to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. There are people viewing the house without our permission. I don't need your permission. Francesca explained that, didn't she? This is ridiculous. Mom's composure cracked. You can't just, is everything okay? Daisy appeared behind me, and I watched Mom's face freeze in recognition. You, she whispered. You're the ones who wanted to build that place. That place, Ezekiel said, joining us, is a community center where we help troubled teens, feed the homeless, and teach English to immigrants. And yes, we also practice our faith there. The horror. Mom's face flushed red. Carmen, you can't be serious. These people, I cut in, are potentially buying your house. And they're going to do wonderful things with it. Isn't that what you always preached? Helping others. Not like this, she grabbed my arm. Please, sweetheart, we can talk about this. Your father and I, we're willing to compromise. Compromise, I pulled away. Like you did with Uncle David when he married outside your faith? How long did it take for you to speak to him again? 10 years? The color drained from Mom's face. How do you know about that? Grandmother left letters. She knew what you and Dad might do, so she protected me. Made sure I'd have options. Mrs. Kent? Francesca's voice cut through the tension as she walked up the path. I believe we've discussed that you're not supposed to be here during showings. This is my house. Partially, Francesca corrected, opening her briefcase. And according to the court order I just received, you're not to interfere with potential buyers. Shall I call the judge? Mom's shoulders sagged. She looked at me one last time, tears in her eyes. You're making a terrible mistake. No, Mom. I'm finally making my own choices. After she left, Daisy touched my shoulder. Are you okay? Better than okay. I turned to Francesca. Do you have the papers ready? I think it's time to make this official. For the next hour, we went through the paperwork. Ezekiel and Daisy's offer was fair, more than fair, really. They even agreed to preserve the library and gardens, though they'd be open to the public now. Just one more signature, Francesca said, sliding the final document across the table. As I signed, my phone lit up with a text from Dad. "Your mother's crying. I hope you're happy with what you've done." I showed it to Marcus, who had arrived to witness the signing. "Are you?" he asked quietly. "Happy with what you've done?" I looked around the room. At Daisy and Ezekiel, discussing their plans to help people. At Francesca, organizing the paperwork that would transform this symbol of exclusion into a place of welcome. "I'm not happy," I replied, "but I am at peace. Sometimes karma needs a little push." "Speaking of karma," Marcus grinned. "Wait until they find out who's moving in next door to their new condo." "Who?" "Uncle David. He just bought the place last week." For the first time in days, I laughed out loud. Sometimes the universe really does have a sense of humor. The cafe where Mom suggested we meet was neutral territory, a small French bistro downtown, where we used to have mother-daughter lunches before everything fell apart. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window where I could see her approach. "You came." Mom slid into the seat across from me, looking smaller somehow, more vulnerable, without the mansion's grandeur behind her. "You said it was important." I stirred my coffee, already cooling. "Where's Dad?" "At home, packing." She smoothed her napkin obsessively. "The movers come next week." "That's fast." "Well, we don't have much choice, do we?" A hint of bitterness crept into her voice. "The new owners want to take possession as soon as possible." The waiter approached, but Mom waved him away. "Carmen, we need to talk about what you're doing. The house, it's been in the family for generations. Funny how family suddenly matters now. It always mattered." She reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. "Remember your 10th birthday? The garden party with the butterfly release? Or the Christmas when you and your cousins put on that ridiculous play in the living room?" "I remember," I said quietly. "I also remember you telling me I wasn't your daughter anymore." I was angry. "We both said things." "No, Mom. You and Dad said things. I just tried to be honest about who I am." She opened her purse, pulling out a faded photograph. "Look what I found while packing." It was a picture of us in the garden, Dad pushing me on the old rope swing, while Mom watched from the porch. We were all laughing. "That swing is still there," Mom continued. "The new owners, will they keep it? They're converting the garden into a community space. Children from all backgrounds will get to play there." "All backgrounds," she repeated softly. "Like that woman, Daisy. I remember her now, from that council meeting. I said such horrible things." "Yes, you did. And now she's buying our house." Mom laughed humorlessly. "Your grandmother would have appreciated the irony. You knew about her letters? We found them after she died. That's why." She hesitated. "That's why we never told you about the joint deed. We were afraid you'd—" "What? Make my own choices? Live my own life? End up like David?" Mom's voice cracked. "Do you know he's moving back to town?" I heard. "Right next door to our new condo." She shook her head. "The universe has a strange sense of humor." The waiter returned, and this time I ordered for both of us. Mom's usual quiche, my standard croissant. "Some habits die hard." "I'm hosting a dinner party," I said after he left. "This Friday. One last gathering at the house before the sale finalizes. Carmen, I want you and Dad to come." Mom's eyes widened. "Both of us." "Yes, there are some people you should meet, things you should understand before the house changes hands. Your father won't like it. Then he can stay home." I stood up, leaving money for the bill. "But this might be your last chance to see the house as it was, to remember who we were, and who are we now?" Mom's question stopped me as I turned to leave. "That depends on you," I replied. "Friday at 7. Bring Dad if you can convince him." "And Mom?" I paused. "Wear something casual. Where we're going, status doesn't matter." Outside, Marcus was waiting in his car. "How'd it go?" "She's scared." I said, buckling up. They both are. Change is harder when you're the one being forced into it. Will they come to the dinner? Mom will. Dad, we'll see. I checked my phone. A message from Daisy about the youth group's plans for the library. But either way, it's time they saw what real family looks like. You're not just selling their house, Marcus observed. You're dismantling their whole worldview. Sometimes that's what karma does. I smiled, remembering the photograph. It doesn't just change circumstances, it changes people. Speaking of change, Marcus grinned. Wait until they meet Delilah. Your mom might actually faint when she realizes who's running the youth program. The pastor's daughter who left their church? I laughed. Yeah, that should be interesting. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Mom still sitting at the cafe table, staring at the old photograph. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered Daisy's plans for the house, the lives that would be touched, the barriers that would be broken. Sometimes destruction is necessary for creation. And sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting people. It's about showing them a better way to live. Friday couldn't come soon enough. The dining room looked different, with Daisy's volunteers setting up folding tables alongside our antique mahogany one. Mom would hate it, the mixing of plastic chairs with her precious Queen Anne furniture. But that was exactly the point. The food's almost ready, Delilah called from the kitchen. Should we wait for your parents? I checked my phone. 7:10 p.m. Give them 5 more minutes. Marcus squeezed my shoulder. They'll come, your mom at least. The doorbell rang at 7:13. I opened it to find both my parents standing there. Mom in a simple dress instead of her usual pearls and designer wear. Dad looking uncomfortable in a casual sweater. You came, I said, surprised to see him. Your mother insisted. Dad's eyes widened as he took in the transformed dining room. What's all this? This, I gestured to the room full of people, is your house's future. Before they could respond, Daisy approached with her warm smile. Mr. and Mrs. Kent, welcome. Please, come meet everyone. I watched my parents' faces as Daisy led them around the room, introducing them to the volunteers, the youth program leaders, and the families who would benefit from the community center. Mom's tight expression gradually softened, while Dad remained stoic but didn't object. And this is Delilah, Daisy said, introducing the young woman who'd been organizing in the kitchen. She'll be running our youth outreach program. Delilah, Mom's voice caught. Pastor Michael's daughter. The same. Delilah smiled. It's been a while, Mrs. Kent. Not since I left the church. You joined their faith too? I found my own path, Delilah said gently. Like Carmen did. Dad's hand tightened on his water glass. Is this why we're here? To parade around everyone who's rejected our beliefs? No, I stepped forward. You're here to see what this house will become. Not a symbol of exclusion, but a place of acceptance. Dinner's ready, Marcus called out, breaking the tension. We all settled around the mixed collection of tables. I'd deliberately seated my parents between Daisy and Ezekiel, with Delilah across from them. The conversation started awkwardly, but gradually warmed as people shared stories and plans. We're keeping the library exactly as it is, Daisy was telling Mom, though we'll add some more contemporary books alongside the classics. And the garden? Mom asked, quietly. The roses stay, Ezekiel assured her. We're just adding a playground and some community vegetable beds. Vegetables? Dad scoffed. In my mother's rose garden. Your mother, I interrupted, left me those letters for a reason. She wanted this house to help people, not divide them. By selling it to, Dad stopped himself, but the damage was done. To people like us, Delilah's voice was sharp. People who believe differently than you do. The room fell silent. Do you know why I left the church? Delilah continued, looking directly at my parents. Because when I questioned things, when I sought my own truth, I was told I was wrong. Just like you told Carmen. That's different, Dad protested weakly. Is it? I pulled out grandmother's letters. Should I read what she wrote about Uncle David? about how destroying family in the name of faith destroyed her heart? Carmen, please, Mom whispered. No, you need to hear this. I opened the first letter. My dearest son, I watch you becoming what your father was, rigid, unyielding, losing your children to preserve your pride. This house was built on love, not judgment. Remember that when your own children seek their path. Tears rolled down Mom's cheeks. Dad stared at his plate. The sale closes tomorrow, I said softly. But tonight, look around. See what this house could have been all along. A place where people come together, where differences are celebrated, not condemned. We're not bad people, Mom said, her voice breaking. No. Daisy reached over and took her hand. You're just people who forgot that love is bigger than doctrine. The house is gone, I continued. But you haven't lost me, unless you choose to. Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor. For a moment, I thought he would leave. Instead, he walked to the window overlooking the garden. Your grandmother, he said finally, would have loved this, all of it. She always said I was too much like my father. He turned back to the room. Maybe she was right. It's not too late to change, Delilah offered. No, Mom agreed, wiping her eyes. It's not. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation and cautious hope. As people began to leave, Dad pulled me aside. We were wrong, he said simply. About everything. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. Sometimes karma works not by punishing, but by teaching. And sometimes, the hardest lessons bring the greatest healing. Tomorrow, the house would begin its new chapter. But tonight, in this moment, something else was being rebuilt. Something far more precious than brick and mortar. The morning of the closing felt surreal. I stood in the mansion's grand foyer, watching Francesca arrange papers on the antique side table that would soon belong to Daisy and Ezekiel. Just waiting on your parents, Francesca said, checking her watch. Are you sure they're coming? They'll be here. After last night's dinner, something had shifted. Not completely, but enough. The doorbell rang precisely at 10. Mom and Dad entered, both looking like they'd barely slept. Before we start, Dad said, his voice rougher than usual. There's something you need to know, Carmen. Mom pulled an envelope from her purse. We found this while packing. It's from your grandmother, dated a week before she died. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short, but the words hit like thunderbolts. My dearest granddaughter, by now you've discovered the truth about the house, but there's more. The joint deed wasn't just about protecting you. It was about testing them. Your parents failed the same test with David that their parents failed with others. History repeats until someone is brave enough to break the cycle. Be braver than they were. All my love, Grandma. She knew, Dad said quietly. She knew we'd do exactly what our parents did to David. And we did, Mom added. We became everything we once swore we'd never be. Francesca cleared her throat. Should we proceed with the closing? Wait, Dad held up his hand. Carmen, what are you planning to do with your share of the proceeds? I exchanged glances with Marcus, who'd been quietly observing from the corner. I'm donating it to Daisy and Ezekiel's community center. They're starting a scholarship program for kids who've been cut off by their families for their beliefs. Mom made a small, choked sound. The first recipient, I continued, is Delilah. She's going back to school to become a counselor for other young people struggling with family rejection. Using our money to help people like you, Dad said slowly. People we pushed away. Karma's funny that way, Marcus commented. Dad reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. Then we'd like to match your donation. What? I stared at him. Your grandmother was right, he said, beginning to write. Someone needs to break the cycle. It should have been us, but, he looked up at me, eyes glistening. You were braver than we ever were. Mom stepped forward. We can't undo what we did to you, or to David, or to others, but we can try to do better. Mrs. Kent, Daisy called from the doorway. I hadn't even heard her arrive. That's very generous, but you don't have to. Yes, Mom interrupted. We do, and we'd like to volunteer, if you'll have us. The room fell silent. I looked at Daisy, who seemed as stunned as I felt. The garden, Mom continued quickly. I could help maintain it. Teach the children about the roses. And your father, she turned to Dad. He's good with numbers. The center will need someone to manage the scholarships. Ezekiel joined his wife in the doorway. We'd be honored to have your help. Francesca shuffled her papers. Well, this is all very touching. But we do have a closing to complete. We gathered around the table, my parents, Daisy and Ezekiel, Francesca with her documents. As we signed paper after paper, I felt the weight of generations lifting. The house that had been a symbol of exclusion was becoming something else entirely. One last thing, Dad said, after the final signature. He pulled out a small box. We found this in the attic. It's your grandmother's locket. We think she'd want you to have it. Inside was a tiny photo of her, young and smiling, standing in front of the house. On the other side was inscribed, "Love opens doors that pride builds walls around." She really did think of everything, I whispered. Carmen, Mom touched my arm. Will you come to dinner next week? At the condo, David and his family will be there. It's time we all sat down together. As one family, Dad added. No conditions this time. I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like that. Daisy and Ezekiel began discussing renovation plans with my parents, while Francesca packed up her files. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the floor, just like it had when I was a child. But now those colors seemed brighter somehow, as if the house itself was celebrating its new purpose. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. And sometimes, karma works in ways that heal instead of hurt. Marcus bumped my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I smiled, touching the locket. I think we all are. 3 months after the closing, I stood in what used to be our formal living room, now transformed into a bright community space. Children's artwork decorated the walls where oil paintings once hung, and the antique furniture had been replaced with comfortable couches and study tables. Miss Carmen, a teenage girl, rushed up to me, her hijab slightly askew from running. Your mom's teaching us about propagating roses. Come see. I followed Sarah out to the garden, where Mom stood surrounded by eager students, demonstrating how to cut stems at the right angle. She looked different here, relaxed, happy. Her designer clothes replaced by practical gardening wear. The trick is, she was saying, to cut just below a leaf node, like this. She demonstrated with practiced ease. Your grandmother taught me this technique 30 years ago, and now you're teaching us. Sarah beamed. It's like a circle, isn't it? Karma, I murmured, making Mom look up. Carmen, perfect timing. Dad's in the library with Delilah, going over the scholarship applications. They need your input. The library had changed the least of all the rooms, though now children sprawled on beanbags between the shelves, reading books both old and new. Dad sat at what used to be his desk, reviewing papers with Delilah. We have 15 applicants for the first round, Delilah explained as I joined them. All kids who've been cut off by their families for choosing their own paths. Like you were, Dad said quietly, not looking up from the applications. Like I would have been, I corrected, if Grandmother hadn't been wiser than all of us. The front door chimed, and Marcus's voice carried down the hall. Special delivery for the community center. We found him in the entrance hall, with Uncle David and his family, carrying boxes of donated books and supplies. The temple's youth group collected these, David explained, setting down his box. They wanted to contribute after hearing about the center's mission. Dad stepped forward awkwardly. David, we haven't properly. Later, brother, David cut him off with a smile. Right now, these books won't shelve themselves. As everyone pitched in to sort donations, Daisy pulled me aside. Have you told them about tomorrow's ceremony? Not yet. I wasn't sure if. Tell them, she insisted. They've earned it. I found my parents in the garden again, Mom showing David's wife her grandmother's prize roses while Dad looked on. Mom, Dad? Tomorrow's the official opening ceremony for the center. We're dedicating the building, and I took a deep breath. We'd like you both to speak. Speak? Mom's hands froze on the rose bush. About what? About change. About how it's never too late to choose love over prejudice. Dad adjusted his glasses. A nervous habit I'd known all my life. We don't deserve that honor. Maybe not, Delilah said, joining us. But your story might help other parents make better choices sooner. A commotion from inside drew our attention. Sarah was at the window, waving frantically. Quick! The news crew is here to interview Daisy about the center. We hurried inside to find a local reporter setting up in the former living room. Daisy was explaining the center's mission while Ezekiel showed them around. And these are our founding families, Daisy gestured to all of us, the ones who proved that love can bridge any divide. The reporter turned to my parents. I understand you originally opposed this center, but now you're volunteers. Mom stepped forward, surprising us all. We learned that the walls we build to protect our traditions often end up imprisoning our hearts instead. And your daughter? The reporter pressed. She was the one who made this possible. She was braver than we were, Dad said, echoing his words from the closing day. She showed us that true faith isn't about exclusion, it's about expansion. Later, after the reporters left and the day's activities wound down, I found myself alone in the garden. The roses were blooming out of season, grandmother's roses, always defying expectations. Marcus found me there, as he always did. Penny, for your thoughts? I was just thinking about karma, I said, touching my grandmother's locket. How it didn't strike like lightning, but grew like these roses. Slowly, naturally, beautifully. Speaking of growth, he grinned. Wait until you see tomorrow's surprise. Daisy's naming the scholarship program after your grandmother. Really? Really? The Eleanor Foundation for Religious Freedom and Family Reconciliation. I laughed through sudden tears. She would have loved that. Yes, Mom's voice came from behind us. She would have. She joined us by the roses, Dad and David following with their families. As the sunset painted the old house in shades of gold, I realized that karma hadn't just changed the house, it had transformed all of us. Sometimes the greatest revenge is showing people a better way to live, and sometimes the path to healing runs straight through the heart of what once hurt us most. The autumn air carried the scent of roses as guests filled the garden for the Eleanor Foundation's first scholarship ceremony. Delilah stood at the podium, her voice strong and clear. Today, we celebrate not just our scholarship recipients, but the power of transformation. In this very garden, I once felt lost and alone. Now, I stand here surrounded by family, both blood and chosen. I watched from the side as Sarah, our first scholarship recipient, wiped tears from her eyes. Her own parents hadn't come, but she wasn't alone. Mom sat beside her, holding her hand just as she used to hold mine. And now, Delilah continued, I'd like to invite Carmen to share something special with us. My hands trembled as I approached the podium, carrying grandmother's last letter. I hadn't shown anyone this part yet, not even my parents. My grandmother wrote this letter knowing what would happen, but there was a part I kept private until now. I unfolded the familiar paper. She wrote, Carmen, when you read this, the house will have served its purpose. It was never meant to be a fortress of tradition, but a bridge to understanding. Your parents will learn this lesson through you, as I learned it through David. The roses bloom strongest where the garden has been pruned. Dad's sharp intake of breath carried across the quiet garden. Tell them, I continued, reading, that I forgave them long ago, and when they're ready, when they understand what really matters, give them this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out another envelope, the one I'd found hidden behind the locket's photograph. Mom, Dad, this is for you. They came forward together, looking almost afraid. Inside was a single photograph, grandmother with David at his wedding, both smiling, with a note on the back. Love wins, it just takes time. She knew, Dad whispered. All this time, She knew we'd have to lose the house to find our way back. Not lose. Daisy stepped forward. Transform. Look around. Every brick, every rose, every smile here carries your family's legacy. Just not in the way you expected. Mom turned to Sarah, who stood nervously nearby. Sarah, honey, would you help me demonstrate the rose propagation technique for everyone? These cuttings will be ready just in time for spring planting. As they moved toward the rose bushes, Marcus nudged me. Should we tell them about the expansion plans? Let's wait, I smiled. They're still getting used to the meditation room in Dad's old study. Uncle David joined us, laughing. Speaking of that study, you'll never guess what we found behind the old bookshelf. More letters, dozens of them. Mother kept every correspondence about the house's true purpose. A paper trail of karma, Marcus mused. More like a roadmap of redemption, Ezekiel added, approaching with a stack of certificates. Ready to present the scholarships? One by one, we called forward young people who'd chosen their own paths, some disowned, some struggling, all brave. Each received not just funding for their dreams, but a key to the center's front door. This is your home now, Delilah told them. Your safe space, your family. When the last key was given, Dad stepped up to the podium, unexpectedly. I spent decades thinking this house was about preserving the past, he said, his voice rough with emotion. My mother knew better. She knew it was about building the future. To all of you who've been rejected by your families, my wife and I once did the rejecting. We were wrong. Let our story be proof that hearts can change, that love can win, that it's never too late to choose differently. The applause was interrupted by Sarah's excited shout from the roses. Look, a late bloom. We gathered around the bush, grandmother's prized white roses, which usually finished blooming months ago. A single perfect flower had opened, its petals catching the autumn sunlight. Now that, Mom said softly, is karma. Or grace, I added, touching my locket. As the celebration continued, I found myself back at the podium, looking out over what our house had become. Children played where I once played, but freely, without the weight of expectations. Parents, who'd once judged now, offered acceptance to others' children. The walls that once divided had become bridges that united. Marcus appeared at my side. You did it, you know. You really did it. No, I corrected him, watching Mom show Sarah how to wrap the rose cuttings for winter. Karma did it. Grandmother did it. Love did it. Speaking of love, he grinned. Delilah's starting a support group for parents, learning to accept their children's choices. Guess who volunteered to lead it? I looked where he pointed, Mom and Dad, sitting with a group of uncertain-looking parents, sharing their story. The roses bloomed out of season, the house transformed beyond recognition, and hearts opened where walls once stood. Sometimes karma doesn't strike like lightning. Sometimes it flows like water, wearing away stone until something beautiful grows in its place. And sometimes the greatest revenge is showing someone a better way to be.